Sekeres and Price for Tuesday, January 23rd, 2024. We're coming to you live from the Go-Goat Sports Studio, built by Arbor Lee, here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver, where if you're heading to downtown for an event, for a game, make it a staycation, call the Wall, 604-331-1000. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price, Grady Sass hitting switches, conducting things alongside intern Lachlan Irvin. In this show presentation, Applewood Auto Group.
Applewood Kia in Langley wants you to join the electric revolution, folks. They really, really do. And the Kia Niro, take one for a test drive. You're going to fall in love. They can get financing for you for 6.49%. And you'll be saying goodbye to the pumps for good. It's all good at Applewood.
Poll question today, the Canucks and Bruins, top two teams in the National Hockey League. Do you want a Stanley Cup rematch? Yes or no? You can vote at Sekeres and Price on Twitter and on YouTube. And it's a resounding yes from me, Blake Price. They're two fantastic hockey markets. So bring on game 33 or whatever it would be, because that Marchand kid has his comeuppance. Still do.
If he wasn't there, this would be a joke of a poll question. And some people might still think so.
I don't know.
There'd be no grudge to
the sweater
to get
is
over.
Still hated here. The sweater
maybe.
is still hated. The smoked bee will forever be hated.
But Brad Marchand is such a character, such a figure that he is, that even if that's the only bit of revenge, people will take great glee if they can make that happen.
Oh man, could you imagine?
Because you can bet he would be up to his antics.
Oh,
he would be hoisting the Stanley Cup trophy over his head in warm up of game one.
Mm-hmm. Now the Canucks have a big Z this time around. Zadorov, yes. That's what Tocchet called him.
Yes,
last week. Yeah, look, we're asking this because the Bruins beat the Winnipeg Jets in a showdown on Monday night from two of the best teams in the league. And of course, the Vancouver Canucks, ho-hum, they win another one, 2-0 over the Chicago
that was a win, eh?
Blackhawks. Do I have this right? Both you and Grady were at the game last night?
I was at the game, yes. Took my nephew and my daughter. And there's a lot of kids. I feel really bad, first off. There were so many. I've not seen that many kids at a Canucks game in forever. And I think everybody wanted to show their kids the pride of Vancouver here, North Van and Connor Bedard, and alas, that was not to be. But I heard chatter from the kids around me in the third period going, "This is boring." It was not a spectacular game.
Yeah, and let's face it, a lot of those kids Connor would have been closer in age to a lot of those kids than many in the audience. Grady, you went too?
I did, and I missed the first two goals of the game, so I didn't.
So you had nothing. You had nothing.
Absolutely nothing. One of the most boring games I've ever watched.
I was going to say, when you take a look at the home games you could have been at this year through 22 of them, 17-4-1, incidentally, at Rogers Arena, that might have ranked as the worst. And Blake, we were talking about in the summer, I think it was the most desirable game for the ticket market heading into the season. People talked about the Oilers game on opening night. They wanted to be there for that. People talked about the Bo Horvat return game with the Islanders. But I believe we ran a poll, and I believe Connor Bedard in the Blackhawks game.
It wasn't quite messy playing the Whitecaps, but it was maybe amongst the top three games for sure circled. And, I driving in, I told the kids, I was like, I don't think it'll be a great game, but I think the Canucks will score a lot of goals. And then 6 minutes in, I'm dunking on that and saying, told you, Dad knows a thing or two about hockey. And then I
thought it was going to be 10-1 against San Jose again.
Because even that Suter goal, he didn't get all of it. It was just sort of like he just got enough of it, and it's, I'm thinking, oh my God, if they're scoring on their sort of their second and third stab at it, then this is going to be a runaway. And in the end, and it's a funny game. I think we should now put to rest that this is a one-line team. Even if they're keeping a lot of our line together, Matt, this isn't a one-line team. The Bluger line, and at times, and they sort of take turns, either Höglander will contribute, or somebody on that, whatever we want to call it, the Suter, Kuzmenko, Mikheyev line, that line will contribute, every once in a while as well. There's enough secondary scoring here. Mm-hmm. Quinn Hughes, of course, that this is not a one-line team. They've got support. The Lotto line, they were given the night off, and they took the night off. Both of those things happened. Tocchet didn't use them in the first 7 minutes of the game. JT Miller, through 7 minutes of the contest, had played 1 minute and 19 seconds. Connor Garland was at 2.5 minutes at that point. Mm-hmm. It's like Tocchet said to them before the game, guys, if we get an early lead, I'm not going to play you a ton. And I don't know that he said it. I'm just saying that's what it looked like with his usage. Yep. He didn't lean on them late because they weren't good. He didn't lean on them early because I don't think he wanted to.
His 5th shutout of the season, he stops, and he winds up stopping 31 pucks. Didn't look like that was going to be the case at one point, but his 5th shutout of the season, it ties for the league lead. Were you a little surprised, Demko, here?
I was surprised, but in the end, thank goodness. And not that DeSmith, wasn't capable of doing the same. He's been played so well. But Demko saved them last night because there was a lot of good saves there. Think of the double left pad save that he made. I think it was in the 3rd. Anytime Foligno was out there, and you say what you want about Foligno's extension and everything, I mean, there was some pushback there from the Hawks. Despite it being a very good AHL team, but they tried, and if not Demko at his best, I think that might have been a 1-point effort.
I realize the Hawks have had some injuries, but you have to think there are some people at the league office who this regular season cannot end early enough for San Jose and Chicago, given what they're doing to the bottom of the National Hockey League. And of course, Chicago, Blake, win another rivalry. They could have the 2 Vancouver first overalls, Connor Bedard and Macklin Celebrini. And of course, we remember that fantastic Canucks Blackhawks rivalry late in the 2000s into the early 2010s, when that Stanley Cup champion Blackhawks team was underpinned by so many British Columbia players. So, yes,
goodness.
If I don't have to see Chicago again this season, I'm okay with that. But we do have to see Chicago again this season. 2-0, the Canucks win. Pius Suter and Quinn Hughes with his 12th goal, which a career high, and we'll have more on Quinn Hughes and his shooting here in a moment. 68 points. It leads the National Hockey League, a .723 points percentage. It is second to the Boston Bruins, a +59 goal differential. Also first in the National Hockey League, and 17 better than second place Winnipeg. 8-1-1 in the last 10, 16-2-3 in the last 21. And as mentioned, Demko with his league-leading 5th shutout. He's tied with Connor Ingram and Delta's Tristan Jarry there for the league lead.
Jeff Patterson dropped an amazing stat here. And there are incredible stats across the board, many of which you just mentioned. How about this one? The Canucks have trailed for 53 seconds over their last 9 games.
Yeah.
They've opened the scoring in 7 straight. And the one game they didn't in the last 9 games, they tied it up a minute later and went on to win.
Yeah.
53
That's been part of the
seconds.
formula, right? That's been part of the formula this year, is that you get that early lead and then you close it out. In fact, Jeff at Rink Wide Van is asking a poll question today, the more remarkable stat. Scored first in 33 of 47. I mean, we were fawning over it when it was 27 of 36, was it? That stat continues to go up.
As does the second one.
29-0-1 when leading after 2 periods. And of course, the only blemish there was a week ago Monday in Columbus on that odd matinee Martin Luther King against a Columbus team that we'll see here on Saturday. Before we get more into the game, Blake, St. Louis coming off a game in Calgary Tuesday, so a tired St. Louis team, and then Columbus, one of the worst teams in the league, Saturday after a couple days rest, and then the All-Star break.
Yeah.
Are we looking at a 5-0 homestand here? Infinitely doable.
I mean, it should be doable. the Chicago game concerns me. Like, and again, there's a huge and easy teaching moment for Rick Tocchet. And really, this should extend for the rest of the season as well. There is no finish line here. The All-Star break is not the finish line. And they need to regain some focus and some drive here, or there could be some embarrassing results here.
Well,
and I thought that as a 2-goal lead is not much in the NHL these days, even against an AHL team like the Blackhawks. Like, I thought, really, are they going to blow this streak against this team because they just didn't feel like playing tonight? And they didn't, but they have to be wary of that here over these next two games.
It's funny because Farhan Lalji asked Rick Tocchet in the preamble Monday, are you worried about this being a trap game? And Tocchet said, I would be, except that we played such a poor second period against Toronto, blowing that 3-0 lead, that I think we've been refocused. And yet there it was again yesterday, Monday, where you get the early lead. And then I think a lot of guys figured, okay, our night's done here. Our work is done. And they could coast the rest of the way. And the fact of the matter is, against a team like that, if I can borrow the phrase, yes, you can. Kuzmenko, his first point since December 23rd against San Jose, his first assist, plural, since November. There's part of me that looks at what Suter, Kuzmenko, and Mikheyev did and said, okay, that's progress. And then there's another part of me that goes, no, you can't consider this any kind of barometer because of the opposition. Where do you fall on that?
You can't wipe it out entirely. I do wonder, like, from the time Kuzmenko jumped on the ice, he was noticeable. It's almost like he saw that the herring were spawning and like knew to go and feast.
Herring, very big in Eastern Europe. So,
and
well
for
done.
Orcas, which they weren't wearing orca last night, but
okay.
But his stopping and starting, and not only the spinning, but I mean, just like the stopping on pucks and not letting the play pass him by, like it was there. There was a concerted effort that you saw from him, and you sort of thought, okay, there's a lot more opportunities than just versus the Chicago Blackhawks to play like this. So that will be interesting to watch going forward. And we've been waiting for this with him. When does the light bulb go off? And we talked about this with Höglander in years gone by and games gone by too. When does the light bulb go off that, when I play like that, good things happen? I hope Kuzmenko got that.
Have you ever eaten herring?
I don't think I have. No. Haddock, not herring.
Well, big difference there, especially in this pickled herring.
Yeah, I don't think I've had pickled herring. Yeah.
No, I wouldn't recommend it. Well, it was the Suter line and the Lafferty line that was really carrying play for the Canucks through most of last night. And then head coach Rick Tocchet had a thing or two to say about Pius Suter and that line. Let's take a listen.
Yeah. There's more triangles, a little more holding on to pucks. They were closer together. Even if a guy lost it, there was another guy there to pick the loose puck up. So hopefully that's a good start. They did a lot of video session the last couple of days, and I think it worked for them.
This is the second time in 3 days where Tocchet has talked about
video. Yeah.
So you do wonder whether that's a more macro message to the rest of the team when coach is specifying video as often as he is.
Well, if there's any risk of some players putting their feet up going All-Star break is here, there's another group of players here that are clearly drilling down and getting more focus. So that's good. I mean, it's a really good sign.
Quinn Hughes with his 12th goal of the National Hockey League season. And of course, he is in this derby with Cale Makar to be the leading scorer amongst defensemen in the National Hockey League. Hughes up to 57 points, Makar sitting at 54 points. And we noticed it really from the first game this year that Quinn Hughes was not simply going to be an outside shooter or somebody who was content to create and then dish, that he was going to look for his own shot. Let's hear from Coach Tocchet on it, and then we'll hear from Quinn himself, the captain.
That worked this summer, though. He worked. He was skating with his brothers in July. I remember talking to him, and he told me he was working on the kind of push and then pull it. And he's had about 5 of those goals in that same spot on that top shelf, short side. It's probably the hardest shot in hockey to hit. To hit that short side. He's hit 5 of them. Some guys take 3 years to hit that, and he's had 5 this year. So yeah, that's a credit for him working how hard he worked in the summer on his shot. His shots, I bet you it's about 10 or 15 miles more harder than it was last year. So that's a credit to him.
Go ahead.
And I think that what he just mentioned about the miles per hour, I think that's what we all thought when we heard that Hughes was working on a shot. Oh, he wants to, take it away from muffin status, and he has. But more importantly, since when did he become the pie plate guy hitting the corners like that? Like Rick is absolutely right that he scored goals from that spot. And
Rick's counted them 5.
And that's, those are the goals reserved for the very best sharpshooters in the league.
I was going to say, it may not be the prettiest goal in hockey, but it's still quite beautiful.
And it's skillful.
And it is skillful. And the other thing is that he's now got 5. Now that's in other teams' heads, right? Like now, if you're a goaltender, you can't cheat off that near post because he's good enough to get it up above the shoulder and into that corner.
And if the goaltenders are doing that, if they're going to be sealing that post to the nth degree when they see him dancing on that line, guess what? The guys that are in front have got 2/3 of the net free.
Well, and you create a dilemma for the defenseman as well, or the forward who's on the check there. Do you steer him wide knowing he can hit that spot, or do you have to protect against that? So that's something I think will.
But is he a good passer?
That's right. Here's Quid himself on his shot.
Trying to find those spots down low where I can score from there, and instead of the wristers from 80 feet out where I'm hoping for a tip or whatnot, or a really good screen, there I can score, and you've seen me score from there. So just trying to, get aggressive and put myself in good positions where I can do that.
Yeah.
Still amazed too at his aggressive play. Like there's on the defensive side, he talked about aggression there offensively. Oftentimes there's an easier play to make for him in terms of just being safe if he's getting forechecked. His nonstop motor with his legs and we know his edge work is great, but edge work is exhausting. And yet, even in the third period, if he's under the forecheck, he's just as comfortable spinning off a guy and using his own legs to get away rather than rimming it around to Roenick or whoever it is that he's playing with on the other side. The kid's just amazing.
Well, and I'll bring you back to a couple years ago, Blake, when we wondered on Hughes and Patterson, in fact, wow, what marvelous players. Is this their peak? And to both of their credit, they have found ways to still get better, still improve, become better and more dangerous hockey players, particularly on the offensive end. With Hughes, he's up to 57 points. I mean, there's a chance to get 60 here by the All-Star break.
For both of them,
and already 4 more goals than his previous career high.
For both of them, I think strength is a big part of it. I think we wondered for both of them. Okay, but can they
actually get physically stronger? They're such slight guys to begin with.
Right.
You can tell they're not frames that are going to put on a lot of weight, deal with all of that.
But they both did. Like they both put on enough muscle and enough strength that they can withstand the rigors of the NHL and they can play 60 minutes in their style.
And in Quinn's case, without losing the speed or the elusiveness as well. Now, all that said, again, we're talking about this win and these performances with a grain of salt. Why is that? It's not just the lineup Chicago dressed Monday. They've lost 17 straight games on the road.
Not good.
And they have scored just 5 in their last 7 road games. So it truly is a glorified AHL team at this stage in the proceedings. Montreal Canadiens, better than the Chicago Blackhawks. That said, still a team that's in the bottom third of the National Hockey League and a team that will be selling off parts by the March 8th trade deadline. Fantastic article today from Frank Saravelli on Daily Faceoff looking at Sean Monahan. And of course, this is the name that we have been talking about for the last few weeks here on Sekeres and Price with regards to trade deadline targets and the rental market. Monahan in the final year of his deal at a very affordable price too. In fact, you take a look at some of the rentals, quote unquote, like for example, Adam Henrique in Anaheim, who we talked about. Monday because he had the 2-goal game on Sunday. He's making $5.8 million. So the Canucks would have to do some degree of cap gymnastics to add a player like that, perhaps even if Anaheim retains 50%. We'll see where they are cap space-wise, closer to the deadline or at the time of these trades. But in Sean Monahan's case, you're talking about a player who's making $1.8 million against the cap. And so that is pretty easy to just drop in your lineup. 1.98, just under 2. That is pretty easy to drop right in your lineup without any kind of subtraction. Frank thinks the Montreal Canadiens are going to be able to get a late first-round pick for Sean Monahan, and making the note that they got a first-round pick from Calgary for taking on the Monahan contract when it was far more expensive.
Wow.
And now maybe getting a first-round pick after rehabilitating the player who has been oft injured, not this year, he's finally healthy, on his way out the door.
Don't tell Flames fans that Montreal will end up reaping 2 first-round picks for Sean Monahan.
What do you think? Is that something you would do if you're in Rutherford and Alvin's shoes?
There's worse moves to make.
Yep.
His versatility, he hasn't earned the right to just be a center. I mean, if he has to get kicked to the wing for this reason or that reason, if they do break up the lotto line, I think that he has to be okay with that. I think he would be playing on a first place team. He's not. Don't forget he's not a light. We were just talking about frames. And he's bigger dude who's had a lot of success in the playoffs. I think he's 21 points in 30 games in the playoffs in his career.
6'2", 202 pounds. I'll get his postseason stats here in a second. 21 points in 30 games.
Yeah.
Now, Frank does a deep dive into the player, and it's instructive because this is a guy who has changed since his Calgary heyday, and with good reason. You can consider him an all situations player, though.
He kills.
He's played both the bumper and the net front on the power play, and of course, that may fill a Vancouver need depending on where Kuzmenko goes from here. He's not a primary penalty killer, but he does it in part because he's such a good faceoff guy. In fact, he's one of the best left-handed faceoff guys in the league. He's still a good passer. He's a high percentage shooter. He doesn't have a big shot from outside, but he knows that, and he doesn't take those opportunities. His shooting opportunities are a little closer to the blue paint. He's still a pretty good defensive player. He's 31 points. And the other guy that we've talked about, Elias Lindholm, the fine Calgary Flames centerman, who many would consider the big price of this deadline, is at 30. So he's outscoring a guy who may fetch the single biggest price amongst the rental players.
He's right on 31 points with Tarasenko, too.
Mm-hmm.
So, in terms of the biggest names being mentioned,
right,
he's there.
Now, as Frank notes, this is not a guy who plays physical anymore. And you wonder whether the injuries have got him shying away from that contact. He is one of the, I think he's somewhere in the 400s in terms of forwards in hits this year. So he doesn't hit anybody.
Mm-hmm. I think he's beating Goudreau, though, who has one hit on the league.
One hit. He's the skating is average. He's not a burner. And, of course, doesn't have a dangerous shot, isn't a complete offensive player by any stretch. And because of his injury history, I think you also have to ask yourself, can he get through the 20, 30, however many games it's going to be, and then multiple playoff rounds without succumbing to anything physical?
I'll say this, though. You also become smarter as a player. And I do wonder if he's not consciously necessarily saving himself for the playoffs, but I think you end up finding yourself in that position. Like if Monahan finds himself in the playoffs, let's go down Fantasy Boulevard here. He's a Vancouver Canuck in the playoffs now as a top-ranked team. I think you're probably laying it all out there again. I don't think you're making business decisions anymore. I think you're probably engaging more physically than you did in January games for the Montreal Canadiens. Fair?
Fair, but he just does it so infrequently now. But yeah. And in terms of a late first round pick, and Jim Rutherford has sort of hinted that is their preferred currency. I think you do have to consider that, particularly if it's going to cost you a whole lot more to get Lindholm or Jake Gensel. Speaking of, Pittsburgh loses 5-2 in Arizona. Did you see the own goal? The Arizona Coyotes become the first club in National Hockey League history to score a power play goal without recording a shot on the power play. And the reason being, delayed penalty on the Coyotes with Pittsburgh killing a penalty. Goalie goes to the bench. Chris Letang drop pass to Evgeny Malkin. It deflects off his stick and into the empty net. Now,
a little bit that almost
it's going to be on every blooper reel forever.
It didn't almost happen to the Canucks last night, but there was a skittish moment on a drop pass on a
there
delay penalty
was
for the Canucks.
Quinn Hughes awfully risky around his own empty net. And of course, when we speak about own goals here in Vancouver, we must note Louis Eriksson.
Yes.
In his first game as a Vancouver Canuck, he never recovered from there.
Never.
So Pittsburgh, in what is a really tight Eastern Conference playoff race, drops a second in a row, 48 points, 5 back of the second wild card with 4 teams to jump. They do have games in hand against some of those that they are pursuing.
Man, that is a race.
Take a look. Second place from the Metropolitan down, the Philadelphia Flyers at 56 points, 55 for the Hurricanes, 53 Detroit, 53 Tampa, 51 Islanders, Devils, Caps at 50, Pens at 48.
I mean, you might laugh, but any level of hot streak from the Buffalo Sabres would bring them back into it. And they're third last in the conference. I mean, they're not that far out of it.
Kyle Dubas had previously said he was going to wait until the All-Star game to see where his team is at. But if this continues, it sounds very much like Jake Gensel and some Pittsburgh Penguins may be available at the trade deadline.
But you just know, because of the pedigree of the team that they're leaving and the want to still surround Malkin and Crosby with some level of talent, that's going to be a higher price to pay. And there's a higher in production right now from a guy like Jake Gensel than there is from a guy like Monahan. And so the question becomes, for the Canucks in their current situation with the assets that they have and don't have, and that is they don't have a huge cupboard, do you bother paying the piper for a guy like Gensel when I think you're still improving your team by acquiring a guy at Monahan's cost? I don't think you could.
The difference between Monahan, Gensel, and Lindholm, given the acquisition cost, could be significant.
Right. Like, I don't think if you just acquire Monahan, you'll see people accusing the Canucks of not addressing forward needs.
Right.
Like, you're addressing
now, in Gensel's case, you're talking about a Stanley Cup champion, right? Where the other two guys, and that's got some currency with some managers and some scouts and some organizations. So, and needless to say,
but a winger,
pure
winger.
True. The other thing is the old trading axiom. You better know a lot about the guy you're sending out, because I assure you're going to know less about the guy you're bringing in.
Right.
They would have a very good
Gensel,
book on Gensel.
Yeah.
We have seen all the ex-Penguins join this club since Rutherford and Alvin took over. Our friend John Shannon wants to make it a drinking game every time you hear the word Pittsburgh or Penguins on any kind of Vancouver-based,
if you missed it yesterday,
sports program. Fair enough. I mean, we'd all be drunk. It happens a lot. Now, practice at Rogers Arena, and this was teased. We knew it was coming in January,
but
and
then
of course,
it disappeared.
Well, but they said coming 23rd. In January, and we knew it had to happen this week because they got 2 more games left, and then they're on a break before All-Star. So chrome helmets have arrived at Rogers Arena for practice. We did wonder, is there any chance of green? And then people sleuthed the video and found out, no, it's going to be blue.
Yeah, if you slow down the video.
Chrome blue.
It could be cool. I don't like the silver and the gold, for the record.
Nor do I.
But because this is a color rather than, I guess the others are colors too, but you know what I mean? It's just, it looks too, I don't know, too flashy. The picture at least looks okay. So,
well, put it this way. We have long criticized the National Hockey League and its marketing efforts and not wanting to step out. I'll give them credit for this. This is arresting when you see it the first time. I'm with you. The Kings in particular. Oh, no bueno. But this is arresting. It may very well play with kids. It may very well play with certain crowds.
It's more muted though. Like the gold and the silver is so blingy. Well, that's it. It's so flat. This is more muted.
I find those helmets distracting. Like I'm not watching the hockey because they're so bloody distracting.
I agree.
I think the blue has a better chance of blending into a hockey game. We'll see. We'll see how they look either Wednesday against St. Louis or Saturday against Columbus. Have they announced a game yet for it, or does it stand to reason it's going to be the Blues game? The shiny blue.
I don't think we have any
shiny blues against the Blues
yet.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, you see this with goalie gear. They usually break it in before the next game or so. Guys do it with the gloves too, right? So,
okay. Well, I want to say a big thank you to everybody who commented and supported. It was fantastic seeing their positive feedback yesterday in what began a new era of Sekeres and Price. We're back to live. Each and every day we'll be live on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook starting at 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. This is the evolution of the show from the very first time Blake and I got back together in February of 2021, or I guess it was March, and recorded something.
April
for show.
Well, April was the show, but in March of that year, we recorded something basically saying, look, our show's coming back. Stay tuned. Also understand it's going to be a different show than the radio show that you were accustomed to over 11 years. And this digital space, it moves fast. And so here we are back on a live channel with you. And thank you to everybody who tuned in to the inaugural one yesterday. And please, some patience with us. There's going to be some hiccups. There was one at the start of today's show with the music. There was one yesterday. In fact, a couple yesterday. One with the cameras.
I'm a walking errors and omission segment.
That's all right. We're giving you this week to get it all out of your system, Grady says.
Yeah.
And then by next Monday, it's got to be perfect.
No pressure.
None, absolutely. I was just basing the date on that beautiful piece of woodwork behind your shoulder there, Matthew.
Well, that is from
Shout
Coach,
out to Arbor Lee.
Yes, and that one in particular is from Coach Kim, one of our longtime listeners. Her and her husband do those these beautiful wall hangers. So yes, we reconvened in the digital space in April 2021. So we're coming up on 3 years on that. And look, we started with a live stream. And then what happened was more and more people just started listening to the podcast version of Sekeres and Price. And so we just dropped the live stream. And then it became apparent, hey, this show's got to get back live, and it's got to get back. It's got to get back on YouTube.
And we should shout out everyone that's followed along with us the last 2 years or so now on YouTube, watching all of our videos. A lot of comments saying, why aren't you guys live on YouTube as well? And hey, here we are.
So we heard you. Here we are. Hit that subscribe button. Thank you very much.
And we'll get to your listener feedback throughout the course of the live shows as we go along. Nick already saying, looks decent, the helmet. I don't think I like it as much as the matte black, though.
No.
Which was unique.
Yeah. Who would?
Thanks, man.
So just, there'll be some few changes and tweaks to the show now with this live element. For the most part, this opening block is going to be hockey, hockey, hockey. We'll deal with the football. We'll deal with the soccer and everything later in the program. Now, huge stories come up with the Lions or Whitecaps, what have you. We'll certainly bring them to this opening block. And, of course, the summer comes around, and hockey typically goes away in August. So it'll be a little bit malleable.
It'll morph.
Yeah, a little bit malleable then. Our first interview will always be on this live stream as well. It will follow the opening block, but there'll be much more on the podcast, including some of the features that you love. To the People We Go is on the show today. A chance for you to feedback and get your comments and thoughts heard on the program. Hashtags the best and worst of Twitter.com. All of that is coming up. Coming up on the live show, you'll hear a welcome Matt. Sorry, coming up on the live show, you'll see Jeff Patterson. Coming up on the podcast, you'll hear a welcome Matt, followed by Jeff. Great Clips is the official hair salon of the National Hockey League. There are 37 salons in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, all Canadian owned and operated. Download the app and find the nearest to you. When you're up next for a cut, you'll get a ready next text. Great Clips. It's going to be great.
Hey, gang, if you're finding yourself a little directionless without purpose on a game night, may I recommend Greta. It's a great spot to catch the game throughout the season. They're at 50 West Cordova, so you're on foot. You're just walking to and from the game. It's a lot of fun. It's a go-to spot for food, drink specials, and fun before and after the game. They do have specials every day. They've got all-day happy hour on Wednesdays, and they've got all those arcade games to keep you busy as well. So make it a fun game night at 50 West Cordova, Greta Bar and Grill, and visit them at gretabar.com.
Rinkwide's Jeff Patterson is our Canucks reporter. And Jeff, have we reached the stage where we can start complaining about the entertainment value of victories?
I think so. I mean, look, that is a glorified AHL roster. We all know that the Connor Bedard storyline went away a month ago, and that was disappointing, obviously, on a lot of levels. Blackhawks try. I mean, the guys that are in uniform, they're trying the best they can, but they've just got absolutely nothing there. And against the backdrop of what we saw and felt and experienced on Saturday, really night and day. So in some ways, it's a little unfair that game came on the heels of one of the most exciting games of the season against the Leafs on Saturday. But you play them as they're on your schedule. And I mean, look, the Canucks are 2-0 against the Blackhawks. Everybody's taking points off the Blackhawks. So the Canucks did what they had to do. But if we're going to grade the Vancouver Canucks against the level that they've established and take into account the talent disparity on the two sides, that was far from the Canucks' best effort of the season last night.
Do you think Rick Tocchet was harder on them behind closed doors than he was with you guys? Because he was pretty moderate. I think he chose his words carefully in front of you guys, but do you think he was harder on them?
I think he is. I think he has established a standard, and they know when, I wasn't expecting 10-1, and it's hard to argue with the 2-0 lead 6 minutes in and really the first 20 minutes. But, we have seen some teams claw back recently. Like Pittsburgh came all the way back from a 2-goal deficit. Canucks won that game in overtime. But Columbus at the end of the road trip, they reeled the Canucks in. The Leafs the other night after a 3-0 lead. So, against a better opponent, if the Canucks played the way they did in the second period, I think that they would have invited trouble. But again, context matters, and you're facing one of the worst teams in the league with the worst power play and a team that just cannot score goals. So they were probably safe at 2-0, but just totally disconnected in the second period. Like they spent way too much time in their own zone. They had trouble completing passes on the breakout, and then took uncharacteristic penalties as well, right? Sam Lafferty puts the puck over the glass, the too many men penalty. Like they just seemed off in that second period, and maybe it was as simple as, the letdown from beating the Leafs and then getting a comfortable 2-0 lead, but it did feel like they took their foot off the gas. And, if they do that against 20 of the 32 teams in the league, they may not have found themselves cruising in the third period. They may have been right back into a tie hockey game, but did what they had to do against the Blackhawks. But my sense is that Rick Tocchet knows when his team is on, and, he didn't have particularly high praise for the Lotto line, and nor should he. I mean, they had 2 shots on goal. Patterson and Miller each had 1, and Brock Besser didn't have a single shot on goal. So, and that's not an isolated incident. That's been a couple of games now. They need more from those guys, but at the end of the night, they've got a goaltender that's not giving up much right now, and they get enough offense regardless who the opponent is.
17 straight losses on the road for Chicago. That is quite a mark. He was asked pregame, are you worried about this being a trap game? And he said, I'm not, because our second period against Toronto was so poor that he thought the guys were focused. And there you go. I
thought those were
a great first period.
I thought those were really interesting comments at the morning skate on Monday, where he said, I thought we were cocky. That was his word, cocky against the Leafs. And then he said a little humble pie. And he thought that would help focus his group, that, even though it's the Blackhawks, you just can't allow yourself any lapses. So again, I think he's cracking the whip behind closed doors. I think he's keeping his team in line, and they've established a bar for themselves. I think they know that they didn't get away with one, again, because they jumped all over the Blackhawks early, but they are going to have to play more complete 60-minute efforts over the balance of the season.
Kuzmenko with 2 points, his first point since December 23rd against San Jose. How much of that do you think? And out there protecting a 2-goal lead in the final minute. Do you think he would have been protecting the lead against another club? And how much of it being Chicago do you think led to finally snapping the schneid here?
Look, the effort was there. I don't want to discount what Andrei Kuzmenko did, because far too often the conversation has been about, why was he benched? Is he going to play next game? he dug in, and that pass was sensational. And you see that, and you think, how in the world could this guy not have had an assist since November 15th? Like, it makes no sense. And then he goes out, and 5 minutes later, he gets a second one. But you mentioned 2 words there, Matt, San Jose. So I went back and I looked, and the last 4 multi-point games for Andrei Kuzmenko this season, Chicago, San Jose, Ottawa, and San Jose in that 10-1 romp. You have to keep that in mind. Like, you can't just feast when the getting is good, and that seems to be what he's doing. But again, I just like he was invested, on the Quinn Hughes goal. It's a second assist, but the work that he does down low to win his battle and protect the puck and those types of things, like not every second assist is equal. And so that's why I say I don't want to make this sound like a slight on Andrei Kuzmenko. Everybody's been wanting, where are the points? Well, he produced points last night. He was in on both of their goals, but there are better teams out there than the Chicago Blackhawks. And so I do think, it remains an open file as far as, when can he step up? When can he pull on the rope in the right direction to help this hockey club? But yeah, I mean, absolutely. And Talkett said afterwards, like a bit of a nod, just to a bit of a test case as well. Their 2-0 lead was safe in the final minute. The Hawks were not going to mount a furious comeback. And so I like the fact, a little love there at the end, put him out in that situation, see what he can do. He was fine. He complimented him for the way that he surfed, as he said, on one of the Blackhawk players, just to, keep him at arm's reach and make sure that he didn't get away and create anything there. So a step in the right direction. Let's go with that for Andrei Kuzmenko, and a wild assist. I mean, that was terrific stuff. And, if Pia Suter had missed that one, that would have been on Pia Suter. It would have been on Andrei Kuzmenko.
Suter should have got one later in the game as well. The ice time in the end for the Lotto line is exactly what it deserved to be. But I do wonder, I was suspicious about the start of the game and their usage in the first place, with how low their ice time was. Didn't see them really for the first 7 minutes of the hockey game. And I almost wonder, and I'm looking ahead now to the usage of the goaltenders. He mentioned that Casey DeSmith's going to play in one of these next 2 games. Maybe do they call up Artur Silovs, or do you call up somebody and give Demko the full night off, maybe in the final game before the break, to try to give Demko a break because he's going to the All-Star game? Like, I wonder if he told the Lotto line before the game, I'm not going to play you guys much in this game. Hopefully we get an early lead, and I'm going to try to give you guys a rest, because it certainly seemed like he made a concerted effort with no special teams involved to keep them on the bench in the first half of that first period.
Yeah, I think there may be some of that. I think also just the way that guys like Höglander and Garland had played against the Leafs, he said that he wants to, get them into a regular rotation. And the fact that there wasn't special teams allowed him to roll 4 lines there. He's got a pretty good feel on when that Lotto line is going, and they weren't going last night. It was interesting. I thought one of their early shifts, they were out there with Hughes and Myers, and it took the Canucks 4 separate attempts just to break the puck out of their own zone. And when they finally did, essentially it was 35 or 40 seconds of Lotto line time that was wasted. And so it shows the importance of getting the puck out of your own zone, get it to your difference makers up front. And look, they kind of felt like a mid-January game against Chicago. Like, I don't think that they were as invested as they have been recently and as they would have to be against better opponents. But, kind of quietly here with all that's going on and all the winning, the goal-scoring hero, Brock Boeser, has kind of hit a wall here for the first time. Now, did we expect that he was going to score at the pace he did up until Christmas? No, but he also has 3 goals in his last 13 games, and 2 of them came in the same game against Pittsburgh. So he's only scored in 2 of the last 13 Canuck games. Obviously, Patterson has taken over some of that load, Garland and other guys. But, Brock's going to get to 30. I'm not the least bit concerned, but 40... he's going to have to get back on that horse again here. So they just need all of those guys. And they were good in the third period on the power play against the Leafs and came through when the chips were down there. But I kind of felt like they wandered through a pretty sleepy game against Chicago. As for goaltending, thought it was fascinating. In my mind, went to the rink at the morning skate, just assuming it was going to be a Casey DeSmith start against the lowly Blackhawks. But I think the decision to go with Thatcher Demko kind of fell in line with those comments that we talked about earlier about being cocky and maybe disrespecting opponents. I think the messaging from the top, if you throw your back up against the team like the Blackhawks, is easy night here, guys. We think we can get by with less than our best here. And so I think it was, we're going to go with Thatcher Demko, chance for him to pad his stats, and ultimately he did that with his 5th shutout. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if they come back with DeSmith, even off a Demko shutout against the Blues, who beat the Canucks at the start of that 7-game road trip. And with that same reasoning, that maybe by starting your backup, you snap your team to attention a little bit more and hope that they dig in and play better as they have all season when Casey DeSmith has been in there. So we'll wait until Wednesday for a goaltending decision. The coach is on the record as saying DeSmith will get one of these games. I'm kind of leaning to him getting the nod against the Blues on Wednesday night.
I saw you're standing on the table demanding Nils Höglander get some power play time, as I think many are off that 2-goal performance in Toronto. You take a look at where he's at. You take a look at Kuzmenko, and again, it's San Jose, but let's say that he's on his way up after hitting the depths. Do they have that top 6 guy they're apparently out on the market looking for in-house, Jeff? Do you think, is that something you'll be watching between now and the March deadline, whether or not either of these guys can get into that top 6 and be that piece that management seems to think they're missing?
Oh, I think they need a piece on top of what they've got on this current roster. And I think that the Andrei Kuzmenko situation is, we give him his flowers for last night, but I think that's going to be ongoing. And I think it's going to be directly related to the level of opponent and sort of the battle level of the games that they find themselves in. There'll still be some nights where his ice time is diminished in third periods, I think. And Nils Höglander has been incredible in that fourth line role. And the coach kind of feels, I think, that that's where he's best slotted right now. He's fourth on the team in goals, though, with 14, and they've all come at even strength. So I get that the second unit doesn't get a lot of ice time, and they don't score when they are out there generally. But I just think that Höglander, what's the argument? And it's a question I have to put to Rick Tocchet here at some point soon, is just what is the argument about, your second unit hasn't scored a power play goal since November. Now, the top unit, when it's on, it's on. And as we saw against Toronto, top unit can be difference makers. So, this isn't going to revolutionize the look of the Vancouver Canucks, but it just feels like a little shine for a guy like Nils Höglander who has performed so well. Plus, he knows where the net is. And so why wouldn't you? What's the downside of giving him a little bit of love and giving him the scraps that second unit gets instead of a Sam Lafferty or a Ilya Mikheyev or, Garland's not coming off there, but Connor Garland hasn't scored a power play goal this season. So, any of those guys, it's impossible for them to say, they're, you can't move them off the second unit because they don't score. Why wouldn't you try a guy that's got 14 goals for you all at even strength?
Mikheyev looked a little more engaged last night as well, which is why maybe he got one of the looks there on the power play. But they're rotating that fifth guy, right? I mean, if somebody's trying to stake a claim, that fifth spot on the first unit seems to be up for grabs.
Yeah, and Pia Suter's not the answer. I mean, in a short term, he's not going to hurt you, so I don't have an issue with them putting him in there. But I still, if Kuzmenko's in your lineup, I'd still go back. When you think of the power play that was 33% through the first 15 or 16 games of the season, and Kuzmenko was a part of it, that group can hum. And so if Kuzmenko is in your lineup, I still would have him back on the top unit. And then, Pia Suter scored a power play goal in Montreal, I think it was, on the 12th of November. That's the last forward to score a power play goal for that second unit. Philip Hronek cashed in a little later on there. But, it kind of feels like it should be open auditions. And if that's the case, then how can Höglander not at the very least be part of this rotation? If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And you've not lost anything, but, maybe you gain a couple extra power play goals somewhere along the line from a guy that has scored 14 at even strength so far this season.
How big a loss is Carson Soucy over the next 5 or 6 weeks?
Yeah, I think significant. And look, they were playing with borrowed money on the health situation. And you look at the Blackhawks and some of these other teams that have been hit hard by the injury bug, and the Canucks haven't. Unfortunately for Carson Soucy, he's sort of taking up their allotment, his third time on the shelf. The first one was only a couple of games, but then, missed the time from mid-November up and through the start of that last road trip. And here now we're saying 5 or 6 weeks was the diagnosis from the coach yesterday. It sounds like a broken knuckle. And he's just a calming influence out there. He's not spectacular. He's rarely going to be a star, but, plays the system, the Canucks the way that they want. He's a big part of the penalty kill. Noah Juulsen has done a nice job there, and this is going to be another run for Noah Juulsen. And so, the value of having depth that can step in and play, and Juulsen was fine last night against Chicago, and he's been fine when he's been in there. But I just think for Carson Soucy, he's long, he's rangy, he's disruptive. That's one of the things I think he does really well, and it's kind of understated on the penalty kill, is denying entries and forcing teams to regroup in the neutral zone and just take time off the clock that way. And he is very good at standing his ground, and then either forcing them to try and dump the puck in, which they generally don't want to do on the power play, or look for other entry avenues. So, if there's a positive spin, it's the fact that once they get through Columbus on Saturday, 10 full days off. So if it is going to be 5 weeks, at least 10 of those days, not game action for the Vancouver Canucks. It's not the meat of their schedule, but they would like Carson Soucy in there. And when he gets back, fingers crossed for him that the third time is in fact the charm, that no more injuries, and that because they're going to need him down the stretch, obviously, and into the playoffs.
St. Louis Wednesday, Columbus Saturday. Chances they sweep the homestand 5-0. What are they up against this week?
Pretty hard to bet against them. Just the way that they're playing right now defensively. The Leafs game kind of standing as the outlier, coming off a 1-0 win in Buffalo and a 2-1 win over Arizona and a 2-0 win now against Chicago. They are finding ways to grind out these low-scoring games, and that was something that they just couldn't do under Bruce Boudreau. They could score goals, but they couldn't prevent goals, and winning the low-scoring games. I think last night was the 5th time already this season that they have won when scoring 2 or fewer goals. Like, that's just a win that the Canucks didn't have in their back pocket under the previous coach. Now, some of that's goaltending. You can't win the low-scoring games if you're giving up 3. And so Thatcher Demko locked in right now with his 5 shutouts. And remember, it wasn't that long ago, like, shutouts were his bugaboo. Like, he could turn in a great performance, but one somehow would sneak past him. And right now he's tied for the league lead with his 5th shutout of the season. And he is just on an absolute roll. His matched a career best with 7 straight victories. He's looking... and again, I know the Leafs got 4 on him, but in that third period when they needed the Canucks, or when the Canucks needed goaltending, he rose to the occasion. So, the idea of them sweeping the homestand, look, they're sitting on 68 points, guys. If they get 1 win out of these next 2 games, and I think they will guarantee themselves 70-plus points at the All-Star break, which, like, it just, there are so many stats on a nightly basis that come out of these Canuck games, but the idea of them having 70 points, it wasn't that long ago. They had a 69-point season, and we're talking about 70 points here at the All-Star.
They pass if they sweep them, they pass, or they come close to passing a second season, in addition to the one you just mentioned. And I also just think it would be so amazing for them to sweep this homestand and further frustrate the Oilers, who will win every single game they play and will still look up and go, we've gained no ground on this team ahead of us, because they've been just as hot. It's been incredible.
Let me ask you this, Jeff. A fantastic piece from Frank Saravelli breaking down Sean Monahan, one of the available rentals at this deadline, suggests that Montreal can look to get a late first round pick back for Monahan, which of course we suspect the Canucks' first round pick will be late. What do you think? Would you give up a late first for Monahan?
I would take a long, hard look at the player. I have to admit, guys, like, did Sean Monahan find a time machine somewhere? Like, honestly, I thought he was 33 years old. Like, he's been around forever. He's only 29. Now his body has taken some bumps and bruises. But when I looked at his as a 29, this guy feels like he's just been at this, and we saw him so often, obviously, in his years in Calgary. So that part surprised me. And on a Montreal team that, struggles to score goals on a lot of nights, he's having a decent offensive season. So I think they could do worse than Sean Monahan. And he would be on my list of players certainly to continue to kick tires on. Let's give the Canucks Pro Scouting Department a ton of credit here. They've barely missed this year. And so I think fans have to put their trust in, if this management group is going in, they're doing it on the advice of the guys that are out there, the bird dogs that are, scouring the bushes and keeping an eye on all these close players. Obviously the ones with Pittsburgh ties, management's got some firsthand knowledge, but I do think that sort of an underrated part of this Vancouver Canucks season is the work that the professional scouting staff has done. And we know in years gone by that's been a massive downfall. So curious to see, but right now, I think Sean Monahan would absolutely remain on my list of players to keep an eye on.
Pretty good playoff producer too in his history.
As we mentioned, he's outscoring Elias Lindholm this year to date.
Really?
We enter play on Tuesday. Last question, Jeff. It's our poll question. The Canucks victory, the Bruins victory over Winnipeg, means the 2 best teams in the league by points and points percentage, your Vancouver Canucks and the Boston Bruins. Are you up for a Stanley Cup rematch?
Well, yes, absolutely. I mean, if that means the Canucks are going to the Stanley Cup final, sure. And then roll the dice against a very good Boston team. But it is funny, Blake, you mentioned everything the Canucks are doing here and the Oilers must be pulling their hair out. And here are the Vancouver Canucks after this dark decade. They find themselves at the top of the NHL standings, and who's right there with them? It's the big bad Boston Bruins yet again. So the Canucks can't seem to escape the Boston Bruins when they're having their good seasons. But, I mean, the storylines would be so rich. The banter, if we can call it that, between the two markets would be incredible. So, yes, I mean, I love theater and drama, and you couldn't get a whole lot more, save for maybe the Canucks and the Maple Leafs meeting in the Stanley Cup final. But, yeah, I mean, you can't pick your opponent, obviously, and if the Canucks can get to the Stanley Cup final against Boston, it means that they somehow have outlasted Edmonton and Vegas and Colorado. And so, yes, 1,000 times yes, I would sign up for a Canucks versus Boston.
That Marchand guy is still there too, last check. So there is still a little bit of revenge factor, at least on one guy.
As long as they don't add Chara and Bergeron at the deadline.
That's right.
Not only is that Marchand guy still there, but now the Canucks have the big Z.
Oh, yes. I guess
Tocchet called him that on Saturday, right? Or last week. So
does that mean free cross checks in front? Never know.
Just don't poke the bear. Fun stuff. Thanks for this, Jeff. Catch up Friday.
All right, guys. Thanks.
Happy hour on Sekeres and Price. Today's beer of the day, Yellow Dog Squirrel Chaser Hazy Pale Ale.
Hey, everybody. If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.